How important is a wicketkeeper to a side?
I've never really seen the use. I like automatic wicketkeeper in the backyard.
It seems like teams are moving away from the need to have a... Look at England, they've dropped Bairstow Folkes. We've spoken about how great a wicketkeeper Ben Folkes is, of course. Bairstow's done a decent job for a number of years. I know he didn't seem to be quite up where he was before his leg break. But England have opted for a batter wicketkeeper, a guy who doesn't keep wicket for his own county. So do we need wicket keepers?
So I think the problem is that England is a really algorithmic side, right? Even under McCullum and Stokes, they really do believe, they've got their theories and, they always win the toss and bowl first in T20 cricket. And, you watch Joe Root play and you're like, everything he does is so algorithmic. Liam Livingstone, I'm going to spin the ball into this batter and I'm going to spin the ball away from all that sort of stuff, right? And the one thing in cricket that we really can't measure at the moment is wicket keeping. Now, there is technology that would allow us to do it, but no one is invested in it and it's quite expensive, but it will probably happen in the next 5 or 10 years. And we are going to learn in about 5 or 10 years how important wicket keepers are. So we might go back all the way to, remember Michael Bates? So Michael Bates, the best county wicketkeeper, in the last 10 years or so. He's, probably 30 and out of a job at the moment because he couldn't bat, right? Apologies if he's watching, but he couldn't bat at a professional wicketkeeper standard of today. We're going to work out if that's what the future is, if we have to go back to that or not. I always look at and one of your favourite players, Alex Stewart. Alex Stewart didn't actually average that much more than Jack Russell when he had the gloves on, right? But the threat of Alex Stewart, when you look at the batting card compared to Jack Russell, is massive, right?
It's the same as Joss Butler.
Yeah, and if you average, I think he averaged like 32 or 33 when he kept, and I think Jack Russell was about 26, 27. But Jack Russell's 26, 27 is annoying. Alex Stewart could make 70 really quickly and completely blow you out in a session. So we understand it from a batting perspective. We can all work that out from a batting perspective, right? But do you remember when Johnny Bairstow dropped like 100 catches in a row off Chris Woakes when he was in South Africa when he was young? That almost ruined Chris Woakes' career. Chris Woakes still doesn't take wickets away from home all these years later. And I wonder if he would have felt a lot more comfortable if Bairstow had taken all those catches, he'd got all those wickets. So we don't know what the impact is of these drops at the moment. You look at someone like MS Dhoni, who is absolutely brilliant around him. He's probably one of the best wicketkeepers we've ever seen with the ball straight at him. But when the ball goes over there, he doesn't dive. And so if someone's marking it, they'll say, that wasn't a drop catch, he didn't go for that. Whereas Ben Folkes is past that. So does Folkes covering more ground count for something? Does MS Dhoni not bringing his gloves back until he gets more stumpings because he takes the ball all in one motion? How much is that? No one's working out any of that at the moment, right? So we don't really know 100% what the value of wicket keeping is, and there's no system that I have seen in place that can be able to tell you that. So we are going with the one thing we can measure, which is runs, right? You talk to old bowlers, and we've got one here, and they will say, I just want the guy who can catch because it's really hard doing my job and I've got the edge. And we all agree with that, right? But then we go back at the end of the day and it's very hard to tell if those catches are more important.
Well, you don't know what would have happened as well, do you? There's no way of knowing.
Yeah, so do you remember when Bairstow, so the Woakes thing I was talking about before, but remember when he came back and he dropped a bunch of catches in England as well, and then he was averaging about 70 for a little while? Remember, he just made all those runs in that little period. I talked to Nathan Lehman, who was the England analyst at the time, and Nathan Lehman said, whoa, he's dropping this many catches and he's making this much runs. So they're kind of balancing themselves out at the moment.
Yeah.
And he's like, but he's either going to have to stop taking catches because eventually he's not going to be able to make this amount of runs consistently. That's where we're at the moment, but because we don't have great fielding metrics and we specifically don't have great metrics about wicket keepers, it's really tough. Then you go through the formats. How many times in a T20 game does the ball go through a wicket keeper's gloves? My guess is it's about 50 times, right? They don't take a lot of balls, right? Maybe they take 15, 20 balls in a game, right? There aren't that many balls that are missed or come through to them. Maybe it's slightly more now with wides and wide Yorkers in modern cricket, but it might be slightly more. But how many times does the ball come through the wicketkeeper's hands because it's thrown in, right? And the wicketkeeper has to make a really good decision and all that sort of stuff. And, I always remember with AB de Villiers, he averaged like 60 when he was keeping, or something ridiculous, right? He's at the peak of his batting, but the ball would be hit to covers, and he would stand back in his spot, and he wouldn't come in. And I was watching South Africa missing runouts just because he hadn't been trained on the other part of wicket keeping, which is once the ball's done, you now need to be the general of the fielding team. Little things like that. Who's marking that down, right?
Well, also, imagine a keeper who's really, really good at implementing DRS.
Yeah, that's a very important one.
I mean, that's a huge call. We've seen it. We saw it in the India series, the England-India series. And who was the keeper before Dubé was brought in? Was it Barrett?
Dubé.
Who was the? Oh, sorry, Jarrell.
Oh yeah, Jarrod. Yeah,
Barrett.
Barrett. Yeah, KS Barrett.
KS Barrett.
So Barrett was just a yes man, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And Jarrell was much more down the. No, I think this is
calmer.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many wickets does that, negatively or positively impact a wicketkeeper's score?
Yeah.
Just being able to use DRS.
Exactly, and also I remember there was a wicketkeeper for, it might have been one of the teams I was working for. I remember having a conversation with a bunch of coaches and the captains, and they were basically saying, look, this guy's not as good wicketkeeper as the other wicketkeeper, but the other good wicketkeeper is also worth runs in the field because he always notices when fielders are out of the place. Like something as simple as that, of just going, no, you need to be 10 metres this way. Whereas the other wicketkeeper wasn't as sure of his place on the side. He didn't want to tell the captain that the captain had put the guy in the wrong spot.
We're living in a world where, if you look around down the England batting card, previously, not so much
Everyone's
now,
wicketkeeper.
right? So could you not have? Can you remember when Ian Bell was seen as the greatest slip catcher to spin, but he wouldn't stand in the slips for pace? Could you ever have a situation where you have one keeper for spin bowling and one keeper for?
Didn't Shield Berry talk about this?
We've got that now, haven't we?
They changed the gloves?
No,
No, he's talking about in different
we've got
games.
that now. Folks will keep wicketing. The likelihood is folks probably will keep wicketing Pakistan.
I'm not sure he will.
But
No, I'm talking about in the series. I'm talking about, okay, so Bashir's coming on to bowl. So here's the gloves.
Ollie Pope.
Ollie Pope switches with Jamie Smith.
Well, there's a really interesting thing with wicketkeepers when you look. So in first-class cricket, we have enough data to have a look at it and realise that wicket-keeping doesn't affect batting all that much, right? So in Test cricket, we think it affects it a lot. You look at Alex Stewart, Walcott and Kumar Sangakkara. We've got a few players who've done both jobs, and it's like, well, when they were wicket keepers, their average was here, and when they were batters, their average is here. Some of that is because they come into the side and they're still learning their game. But in first-class cricket, we have heaps of data because so many people have been wicket keepers and batters.
Yeah.
There's not a big difference between wicket keeping and not wicket keeping in terms of average.
Do you
but
think
in Test cricket,
that's different though,
it's the fourth innings.
Yeah.
And you get exhausted.
Exactly.
And I think they get exhausted when it comes to batting and when it comes to wicket keeping. So Shield Berry's big thing was, if you have the 3 wicket keepers in your side, why don't you share the job around a little bit more?
So say Jamie Smith keeps in first innings, then scores a century, and he's last man out.
Yep.
Then Ollie Pope takes the gloves for third innings, or just to give
I
Jamie
think
Smith a bit of a break.
if any side does it, it'll be this side.
Yeah.
Because
Well, that's
they're
true,
not
yeah.
bothered about what the perception is. I remember when Bob Willis had a go at Matt Pryor and called him Dyer Pryor. That was out in Sri Lanka. He dropped a couple of catches. I remember in one of the Test matches, I think it was in Gaul, I walked out to bat Matt. Matt, he had 70 odd. He got dropped after it. We dropped one off side bottom at the end of the day. I walked out to bat. Matt was on his. He was gone. He was on his feet.
He talked about the conditions.
He was on his.
didn't he? 'Cause
He's
that's it,
out on his feet.
The
And I'm
heat
like,
was so ridiculous. He lost
he
X amount.
He didn't have. I remember. I think, did I get out or Matty get out? Well, one of us got out, and I come up the stairs. We had obviously the 10 minutes, and we had about 4 or 5 overs to bowl. And Matty couldn't get his pads off.
Yeah.
He couldn't get his pads off, and that was always the thing. I always said that to Bob afterwards. When you had a go at Pryor, I never minded Bob having a go because it was hilarious. But the one that had always stuck with me, I remember saying to him, when you had a go at Matty, I wish you'd have seen him in the dressing room. I wish you had seen him in the dressing room for that 10 minutes. He was out. He was exhausted, and that's where another week, because that didn't end his career. And actually, I think that helped his career, because what he did was, when he got dropped, he went away and he became fitter. He was a much better wicketkeeper when he came back, and he became. I still think Pryor's probably the best wicketkeeper England have had since Alex Stewart. I think that combination, from a bat wicketkeeper, because that team that Strauss had, that 7, 8, 9 of.
He did come in after the great,
I mean, he did.
100 Test centuries between them or something.
Yeah,
I love Matt, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's different from folks coming in against.
A Butler coming in at 100 for 5.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But he
and on good pitches.
But he came back as a better wicketkeeper off the back of it. But what you're saying there is that one incident when Bob was having a go at.
What did Bob say?
Bob just said it was Dyer. He was calling him Dyer prior because he dropped.
No, I mean, what did he say when you said that?
No, Bob just shrugged his shoulders and
just for entertainment.
It was entertainment. So
it's
that
really
has consequences because even commentators have consequences on what they're saying about certain players. I do it all the time. Open my mouth and stupid things come out. I'm very good at that.
But as a bowler,
sometimes But as a bowler, from a wicketkeeper's point of view, I want somebody to catch a ball. I'm very selfish. I just want to make sure that if I've worked so hard to work him over and get him nicked off, I want the bloke behind the stumps to catch it. And I want him to catch it more often than not. And I think in England, you create more chances. And so you can see why in the subcontinent that we do have the best gloveman in, i.e. Ben Foakes, because chances are limited. Chances are few and far between.
Well, the last great wicketkeepers are mostly in the subcontinent, right?
Yeah.
So Prasanna Jayawardene kept playing, and obviously we had Saha, who was a brilliant wicketkeeper. You know, they keep going with those in some of those Rizwan's a really good wicketkeeper as well, though not always in the side. But you know, they keep going with those sorts of specialists, where the rest of the world is kind of like, we can get an athlete who stands 30 metres back and they can jump around and they'll probably take most of the catches. It's a very different kind of thing. But if you look at it from a perspective of a bowler, bowlers on average need to come up with about 30 chances to win a test match, right? You know, 30 chances usually gets you around 20 wickets. If it's 28 chances, the score's going to be a little bit lower, and that's a big change on that. And I remember watching, and there are times when you look at, and I think Jack Russell is a good example of this. Darren Berry, the Victorian wicketkeeper, is another good example of this. They actually proactively made wickets happen.
Yeah.
You know, so Darren Berry, going up to the stumps and keeping up at the stumps to Paul Rifle, who was way too quick for a wicketkeeper to be up the stumps, and getting a leg side stumping off David Boone. That changes a whole game. And a normal wicketkeeper cannot do that, right? Darren Berry, Shane Warne used to stand at first and half slip, right? Because Darren Berry's like, I can cover all this, you're fine. And you look at Jack Russell in limited overs cricket and just going, okay, you guys can't use your feet to medium paces ever again. Right, and I'm not going to drop any of the catches. So if you get an edge, I'm still a big chance of taking that. That's actually proactively making a wicket, right? So we only have a handful of wicketkeepers in the last 50 years who probably have the ability to make a wicket happen from nothing. Does that change a game though? If you could do that once or twice a game.
And how do you measure that?
And that's the next part that we need to get to. There is a way of doing it. I won't bore you guys with the details, but it involves spatial tracking software and artificial intelligence. But we can do it because other sports are already looking at those sorts of things. But that's where we need to go. The best way of looking at it is the same way we look at like expected averages with CricViz. CricViz go, okay, well that ball's, it's 87 miles an hour, it's angled in, and then it's gone away this many degrees, and a normal player will average 20 against that ball, right? And so we can tell then if there's, a batter who averages 70 against that ball is probably better against that, that kind of bowling. We can do the same with wicket keeping. This edge has come at this pace, it has gone this far from the player, and that would be caught 85% of the time, and this wicketkeeper catches it 50% of the time. Or those weird edges, Harmy, that sort of drop. There'll be some wicketkeepers who'll be very good at coming forward, and there'll be some wicketkeepers who won't be. And the stumping. I don't know how many first-class stumpings Joss Buttler had, but at one stage in his career, he basically had no first-class stumpings. Right? Joss Buttler had trouble concentrating in red ball cricket when he wasn't expecting the guy to run past the ball. That's a skill that he did not have as an international wicketkeeper. We could tell that from the few stumpings that he had taken. Generally, you can't even see that in the data, right? We can get to a point where we can start to understand that a lot better, but it is 5 or 10 years away. The thing that we can understand at the moment is runs, so we'll go with runs.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.